I'm Anna, a 33-year-old homemaker. My husband, Leo, and I have been married for 4 years. But we haven't been able to have a child yet. We're undergoing fertility treatments, but conceiving has proven difficult. One day, as I was returning from the grocery store, I noticed a little girl, a complete stranger, squatting in front of my house. I wondered why she was outside in the cold winter weather without a coat, so I approached her and asked, "Are you waiting for someone? Can you tell me your name?" "Abigail." "Abigail, okay. Where's your mother?" "Mommy went somewhere," she replied. "Are you lost? What's your mother's name?" "Audrey." "Audrey." My heart sank. Audrey, the sender of the letter, was my older sister. She had left home at 20 and never returned. It's been nearly 17 years since we last saw her. As a teenager, she often ran away, got into trouble with men, and caused financial and emotional strain. Now, to find out she had a child. Abigail handed me a piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were the words, "Take care of this child for a while." "No way," I whispered. "Are you Audrey's daughter?" "Mommy said to stay here because you're her sister," Abigail explained. I took her hand and let her inside. She was freezing and trembling. I wondered how long she'd been outside. Audrey had always been an irresponsible sister, but leaving her child like this was shocking. I'd always wanted a child but couldn't have one. Pushing aside my feelings, I turned on the stove and wrapped Abigail in a warm blanket. "Abigail, are you hungry?" "Yes, I haven't eaten anything since yesterday." "You haven't eaten?" My concern deepened. "I'll get you some food right away." I heated up some pumpkin soup for her. "Yesterday, I made some pumpkin soup," I said as I gave it to Abigail. It was her first time trying it, and she eagerly drank a lot, clearly enjoying the taste. "This is delicious." "It's really good," she exclaimed with a big smile. I was delighted to see her enjoy the soup so much, but it also saddened me as I wondered what kind of meal she was used to. Instead of questioning her about her usual diet, I focused on cooking more food for her to enjoy. I made fried chicken, an omelette, and rice, and she devoured everything, praising each dish as delicious and tasty. Once she seemed completely satisfied, I suggested we take a bath. It seemed she hadn't bathed in a few days, and her hair was greasy. "Abigail, how about a bath?" I asked. Her expression tensed for a moment, and I could tell she wasn't entirely comfortable with the idea. "You don't like baths?" I asked. "No, it's fine," she replied hesitantly. I hurried to the bedroom to find some smaller clothes for her to wear as pajamas. When I returned to the living room, Abigail was gone. Hearing water running in the kitchen, I peeked in and found her trying to wash her hair in the kitchen sink. "What are you doing? The water is so cold," I exclaimed. Abigail apologized, but I assured her she didn't need to. I wrapped her in a blanket and took her to the bathroom. She seemed amazed as I let her inside. "This is just like the house I saw on TV," she exclaimed. From her reaction, it seemed the house where Abigail lived did not have a proper bathroom. It broke my heart to think that Audrey made her wash in cold tap water from the kitchen to save on gas money. Holding back tears, I undressed Abigail and gently placed her in the warm bathtub. "It's so warm." "Are baths always this warm?" she asked, eyes wide with wonder. "Yes, they are. From now on, you can take a warm bath every day." I said, "Really?" "I'm so happy," she replied with a big smile. I helped Abigail warm up and get clean in the bath. Her hair was slightly tangled, but I treated it to make it more manageable, and she soon looked like herself again. After dressing her in my loungewear, we relaxed on the couch in the living room as we waited for Leo to come home. When Leo walked in, Abigail seemed startled and drew back in fear. "I'm home," he called out. "Welcome back," I replied. "This is the girl I told you about." "Hello," Leo greeted, but Abigail continued to shy away. "It's okay," I reassured her. "This is my husband, Leo. He's very kind, so you don't need to be afraid of him." I explained the situation to Leo, and he was visibly upset. "That's unforgivable. We'll keep her here for a while," he declared. "Of course," I agreed. How could she abandon her own child? Once Leo and I had discussed the situation, we went back to Abigail, who was curled up in the living room. I spoke gently to her. "Abigail, as I mentioned, this is my husband, Leo." "Hi, Abigail, please call me Uncle Leo," he added. Abigail nodded timidly. I went on to explain, "The three of us will be living together here for a while. Is that okay with you? Is it really okay for me to stay here?" Abigail asked hesitantly. "Of course," I said with a reassuring smile. "And once we get settled, you'll be able to go to elementary school." "I've never been to school," Abigail said quietly. "You've never been to school? What about kindergarten?" "I haven't gone to kindergarten because I'm no one," Abigail mumbled. My heart ached hearing her words. She was too young to understand why she might feel this way. I decided not to press her further that day and let her rest. Instead, the next day, we would find a way to help her adjust to her new life. I informed my parents about Abigail's situation, and they rushed over to see us. Upon meeting Abigail, they introduced themselves as her grandparents, Grandma and Grandpa, and enveloped her in a comforting hug. Abigail seemed puzzled but happy, as if she had never realized she had grandparents before. After entrusting Abigail to my parents' care, I headed to City Hall to obtain Audrey's family records. To my surprise, Audrey was unmarried, and there was no record of any children. It appeared that Abigail's birth had never been officially registered, making her essentially a non-existent child who never received any formal notices, such as enrollment for elementary school. This revelation shed light on why Abigail referred to herself as no one. After consulting with various authorities, including the Child Consultation Center and the municipal office, we finally managed to establish Abigail's family register. I happily informed her, "Abigail, now you can go to elementary school. I'm so happy for you." By this time, it had been over a month since Abigail came to live with us, but she hadn't opened up much. She always seemed skittish, especially whenever Leo or I moved. Additionally, whenever she made a mistake, she would apologize excessively, curling up her body and covering her head. It was evident that Audrey's past actions had left a lasting impact on her. "Abigail, you don't have to apologize so much," I reassured her. "Uncle Leo and I will never get mad at you, and we will never harm you. I promise." "Really?" Abigail asked with a glimmer of hope. "Of course." I replied sincerely, I made a promise. But despite that, Abigail's shyness persisted. However, as time passed, she gradually became more talkative and even began to smile more often. Then one day, Abigail blurted out, "I wonder when she will come for me." Those words struck a chord with me, evoking a sense of sadness. Despite Audrey's mistreatment, Abigail still longed for her mother. Since Abigail's arrival, every day had been filled with joy for me. We had wanted children so badly and treated Abigail as our own daughter. We hoped she would stay with us for a long time. The day after Abigail's statement, she received an invitation to elementary school. I was relieved that she would finally experience the same school life as other children. "Now that it's settled, we need to prepare for school," I said to Abigail. "We'll need to buy a school bag, stationery, and lots of clothes. Let's go shopping today for new clothes and stuff." "I can get new clothes." I've already got some, Abigail replied. It's not enough. You'll need more comfortable clothes for school, I insisted. So, Abigail, Leo, and I went to the shopping mall and got everything she needed for school. I was so excited about preparing for her school entrance that I ended up buying a lot of clothes and stationery. As we headed home, the three of us laughed and joked about buying too many things. However, to my surprise, I saw Audrey standing in front of our house. "Mom!" Selena exclaimed. Audrey responded coldly, "It's not, welcome home. What were you thinking? How dare you come here?" I stepped in, trying to calm the situation. Hey, calm down. Don't yell. It's not productive. First, you need to apologize to Abigail. But Audrey only glanced at Abigail and refused to make eye contact. What are you trying to do? I asked. We can't just stand here talking. Let me in the house. I'll do it, even if you don't tell me. Let me go, Abigail, Audrey said, ignoring my question. I decided to let Audrey in and ask her what was going on. Is this your husband? She asked, pointing at Leo. He's a nice guy. Nice to meet you. I'm Leo, he replied. I don't know how to say this, given it's our first meeting, but the way you've treated your child makes you an unfit parent, Leo stated boldly. Audrey seemed taken aback by Leo's boldness. You're too arrogant, my brother-in-law. You can't talk to me like that. You don't know me. Maybe not, but I do know you didn't take care of her properly. How could you neglect your own child? Leo countered. Audrey, clearly irritated by our accusations, seemed unable to grasp the gravity of her actions. I was perplexed by her lack of accountability. I asked Abigail how she felt about seeing her mother, and it was clear she was still scared. She couldn't look Audrey in the eye and recoiled in fear. Initially, I assumed Selena missed her mother, but now I wasn't so sure. As I was contemplating this, Audrey spoke up. You two don't have kids, right? She asked. No, but so what? I responded. Well, I'm going to leave this child with you. She declared, I've raised her through the toughest stages of her life. You should be grateful to have an older kid. Now Leo was incredulous. Do you even know what you're saying? You're abandoning your own child as though she's an object to be handed off. I know exactly what I'm saying, Audrey shot back. I'm giving you Shavos people a kid to raise. You should be thankful. I shook my head in disbelief. That's outrageous. We're not giving her back to you, even if you ask. We've already made her a family register, and she's going to start elementary school next month. We'll make sure she's happier than she was with you. Oh, so you've made a family register for her, Audrey retorted, seemingly indifferent. I did, I responded. Why didn't you file a birth certificate? Audrey questioned. Because if I had, they would know I have a child. I didn't want to disrupt my life for such a selfish reason. Audrey's admission explained why Abigail had been unable to attend kindergarten or elementary school. Her callous attitude continued to baffle me. That's not right. Abigail deserves an education. What you've done is neglect, not just active truancy, I told her, knowing that reasoning with Audrey was pointless. Audrey had apparently broken up with Abigail's father before Abigail was born and had never registered the birth. To date, other men, she often left Abigail alone, pretending to be unmarried and childless. Her goal was to find a new partner and raise her child. We'll take care of Abigail, I said, firm in my decision. But please don't come back to see us again. Then give me 10 million yen. I'm giving you a person, so 10 million is a small price to pay, right? Audrey demanded. What are you talking about? You're trying to sell your daughter. I was horrified. Of course, I'm not going to pay you, though. Abigail is a human being, I said firmly. When I refused to pay, Audrey threatened to take Abigail back and confine her at home, forcing her to wash with cold tap water again. I won't let you do that, I said. Fine, 10 million then, she retorted. Well, I can't get it for you today. You'll have to come back later to pick it up. I'll keep Abigail here until then, I said, pretending to agree to her demands to keep Abigail safe. Whatever. I don't want to be bothered with her anyway, Audrey replied dismissively. Though I had no intention of paying Audrey, I lied quickly to prevent her from taking Abigail away. Knowing Audrey might return to reclaim her, Leo and I considered what steps we could take next. But before acting, we wanted to understand how Abigail felt. Abigail, do you want to go back to your mommy? I asked her gently. I don't want to go back. Mom scares me. She always bumps into me and says mean things. I don't want to go back, Abigail confessed. I see, I said gently. The other day, you mentioned wondering when your mother would come for you. Was that because you were afraid she'd make you leave us? Yes, Abigail replied, her eyes downcast. I was worried that if Mommy came, I'd have to go back to that house. But I want to stay here forever. I understand, I reassured her. We'll do everything we can to make sure you can stay with us from now on. With Abigail's feelings clear, Leo and I decided to investigate Audrey's background further. We contacted an investigative firm known to Leo and discovered Audrey was now engaged to a successful lawyer. We formulated a plan to keep Audrey from taking Abigail away and worked discreetly to prepare everything. A week later, when everything was set, we informed Audrey that we had the money and invited her to our home for the exchange. During the meeting, I had my parents care for Abigail. When Audrey arrived, she immediately asked if I had the money. I won't give you the money, and I won't give you Abigail either, I declared firmly. Audrey's expression turned sour. I came all the way here because you said you had the money ready. Now give it to me. Do you realize how heartbroken Abigail is? She challenged. You're trying to sell your own child for money. Unbelievable. Leo exclaimed. How I raise my child is none of your business, Audrey shot back. Children grow up just fine on their own. You don't understand because you don't have kids. Did you even tell your boyfriend about having a child? I asked pointedly. Of course not. He's a successful lawyer, and we're getting married next year. We plan to live happily ever after. Don't bother us, Audrey said dismissively. Just then, the door opened, and Audrey's fiancé, the elite lawyer, walked in. He had heard our conversation. Don't tell me what you just said is true, he said, shocked. Did you lie to me? What's going on? Why are you here? You told me you were unmarried and childless. I've never been married, Audrey said. I just happened to have a child by mistake. By mistake. That's a terrible thing to say. Leo exclaimed, disgusted. The lawyer confronted Audrey. I was about to marry you without knowing you cheated on me. Of course, I'm breaking off the engagement. You lied to me, so you'll need to pay me alimony. Wait, broken engagement alimony? Please don't leave me, Audrey pleaded. Shut up. I can't marry a woman who treats her child like that. I don't even want to see your face, the lawyer replied, turning his back on her. Audrey turned to me, her eyes filled with anger. Rachel, you brought him here. Why did you do this to me? Because I knew I couldn't handle it the usual way. I'm going to discuss Abigail's case with this lawyer, I explained. I was suspicious, but after hearing your words today, I realized the truth. From now on, this lawyer will represent me and my family. You'll regret making an enemy of a lawyer, Audrey threatened. Soon after, a police officer arrived at our house. I had previously reported Audrey for child abandonment, and authorities had secretly recorded our previous conversation. I also informed them of her visit that day. Audrey was taken into custody for child neglect and abandonment, facing a stint behind bars. Although it was a lengthy and complex process, Abigail was eventually allowed to stay with us permanently. The lawyer demanded compensation from Audrey for breaking the engagement, and she faced legal consequences after her release from prison. Audrey lost both her fiancé and Abigail. Additionally, she had to work hard to pay the alimony and child support, which took a toll on her appearance and ability to attract men. Recently, she stormed into our house, crying and demanding Abigail back. "She's my baby. Give her back," she pleaded. "What are you talking about? Abigail is ours now. I won't let you take her back," I told Audrey firmly. "No, not Mommy. Uncle and Auntie are Mommy and Daddy," Abigail chimed in. Rejected by her own daughter, Audrey walked away in despair. I vowed never to let her regain custody of Abigail. Audrey would have to reflect on her actions alone. Meanwhile, Leo and I have stopped our painful infertility treatments. The three of us now live our days filled with laughter and joy. I'm grateful for the happiness Abigail has brought into our lives, and I hope to spend the rest of my life giving her all the love I can.
The first time I met Brianna was at a coffee shop just off campus. I was a sophomore working part-time as a barista, juggling my studies with the demands of earning enough to stay afloat. She walked in with an air of confidence, her laughter filling the small space as she joked with a friend. I couldn't help but notice her vibrant energy. When she ordered a chai latte, I accidentally gave her a cappuccino instead, leading to an awkward exchange that ended with her smiling and saying, "I'll give you a pass, this time." That chance encounter turned into more. We kept bumping into each other at campus events, and I finally mustered the courage to ask her out. Our first date was nothing glamorous, just burgers at a local diner and a late-night walk by the lake. But it was perfect. Brianna was studying criminal justice, her dream to work in law driving her determination. I was captivated by her ambition and her ability to make me laugh until my sides hurt. By the time we graduated, we'd become inseparable. I secured an entry-level role at a publishing house, and Brianna found a position at a law firm. We worked long hours and lived in a tiny apartment with creaky floors and peeling wallpaper, but we were happy. It was during those years that we built the foundation of our life together. Long talks about our dreams, late-night dinners of cheap takeout, and laughter that echoed through those shabby walls. When our first child was born, life shifted in ways we couldn't have imagined. I remember holding her hand as she gave birth, marveling at her strength and the new chapter unfolding before us. Brianna temporarily stepped back from her career, pouring herself into motherhood while I climbed the corporate ladder. Despite the sleepless nights and endless diapers, we were a team, balancing the chaos with love and unwavering support for one another. As our family grew, so did the demands on our time and energy. We moved into a modest house, gradually transforming it into a home filled with memories. Brianna returned to work once our youngest started kindergarten, excelling as a paralegal. Watching her thrive professionally while managing our family with grace only deepened my admiration for her. Our days were hectic, but we always made time for each other, weekly date nights and summer vacations where we'd reconnect away from the noise of everyday life. Looking back now, I realize those early years were filled with milestones that shaped us. Every triumph, every challenge, and every compromise brought us closer. We'd weathered storms before, financial stress, career shifts, and raising children, but nothing had prepared me for the crossroads we were about to face. The signs had been there, subtle yet persistent, but I was too blind to acknowledge them. For several weeks, the clues had been right before me, yet I failed to see them. My wife, Brianna, had begun lavishing me with an unusual amount of care and attention. Instead of the usual quick toast and coffee in the mornings, she started preparing elaborate breakfasts. Evening meals became a celebration of my favorite dishes, often accompanied by wine. She'd then appear in new lingerie, shower me with affection, and entice me to bed earlier than usual. Did I question this transformation in our 24 years together? Not at all. I welcomed the change as a refreshing turn in our routine. After our youngest child left for college a few months ago, I resolved to show Brianna how much I appreciated her. I made it a point to be home by 5 every evening. We began enjoying upscale dinners, attending local theater shows, and even tried dancing, a hobby we hadn't explored in years. I brought her flowers regularly and eagerly embraced this new phase of our empty nest lifestyle. My name is Tyler Winslow, though everyone calls me Ty. My wife, Brianna, Bree for short, and I had been married for almost 25 years. Like any relationship, we had our ups and downs, but the good times far outweighed the challenges. I was content with our life. I work as a senior director at a major publishing house, having climbed the ladder over 2 decades. My expertise spans every aspect of publishing: reviewing manuscripts, working with authors, coordinating with designers, negotiating contracts, managing budgets, and overseeing marketing and film rights. Introducing new authors and their books to the world has always been a point of pride for me. Brianna, nearly 45 years old and stunningly beautiful, has a career of her own. Thanks to good genes, a healthy lifestyle, and proper nutrition, we've both aged gracefully. People often compliment us as a striking couple. Since our youngest started kindergarten, Bree has been working as a paralegal at the prestigious law firm Thomas, Dixon & Harris. Over time, she was promoted to manage the paralegal team, overseeing assignments and workflow for the entire department. Everything changed last Wednesday. I came home as usual around 5 p.m. and found Bree in the kitchen, preparing dinner. For weeks now, her meals had been more elaborate and thoughtful than ever before. I kissed the back of her head as I walked in. Typically, Bree would turn to kiss me properly, but this time she didn't. "No grand welcome kiss for me today?" I teased. She responded without looking up. "I'm just glad you're home." Her tone felt distant, as if she was avoiding even a brief moment of connection. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "Nothing at all," she replied quickly. "Go change, and I'll have a glass of your favorite wine ready when you come back down." Though her response felt dismissive, I brushed off my unease and went upstairs. After hanging up my suit and tossing my shirt in the laundry basket, I changed into more comfortable clothes, a pair of Dockers and a sweatshirt. Dinner that night wasn't extravagant, but it was clear she'd put thought into it. We started with a simple salad of lettuce and tomatoes, followed by a main course of roasted pork served over cauliflower rice. As we toasted with glasses of wine, Bree looked at me and said, "You know I love you, right?" There was something different in her voice. This wasn't the usual casual "I love you" we exchanged daily. I nodded, replying, "And I love you too." After dinner, we cleared the table as usual. I loaded the dishwasher while Bree stored the leftovers. She excused herself to go upstairs and change into something more comfortable. Anticipating another romantic evening, I eagerly followed her lead. When I entered the dimly lit living room, I saw Bree reclining on the sofa in a revealing negligee that barely covered her. Her beauty took my breath away. Without hesitation, I knelt by the sofa and kissed her deeply. The moment was electric. My kisses trailed from her lips to her bare shoulders, and soon her negligee slipped off, exposing her chest. Her figure was stunning, and I couldn't help but admire her, as if for the first time. "You love me, don't you, Ty?" she whispered. "You'll always love me no matter what?" "Of course," I assured her without hesitation. I quickly undressed and joined her on the sofa, where our passion ignited once more. Half an hour later, we lay entwined, savoring the afterglow. That night, she seemed more fervent than ever. "It feels so good to rediscover the spark we've missed over the years," I said, kissing her gently. Our conversation drifted to compliments about how well we both maintained ourselves over the years. I teased that she could easily pass for someone in her early 30s, while she playfully ran her hand over my abs, praising my fitness. Just as I was drifting off, Bree's voice pulled me back. "Honey, there's something I need to tell you," she said softly. "Anything," I murmured, still half asleep. "You know how much I love you, right?" Her voice was barely audible. "Yes, and I love you just as much," I replied. She hesitated before continuing. "Darling," she began carefully, "this Friday I've made plans to meet someone from my office for the night." Her words hung in the air for a moment before they truly registered. When they did, I stood up abruptly and locked eyes with her. "What is this?" I asked, my voice firm. She tried to pull me back down, urging my head to rest on her chest again, but I resisted. "No, seriously, what are you talking about?" I pressed. "It doesn't change anything about how we feel for each other," she said softly. "I'll still love you, And you'll still love me. I blinked, taken aback. You can't be serious. Is this some kind of joke? She shook her head. No, Ty, I'm not joking. I have a date this Saturday with a man from my office. We're going out for dinner and dancing. After that, we'll go to his hotel room and I'll spend the night with him. I'll be back home late Sunday morning. I stared at her, stunned. So what you're really saying is that you're planning to spend Saturday night and Sunday morning sleeping with some guy. Don't put it like that, she said, frowning. That's crude and unnecessary. He's a good man and I like him. The shock jolted me fully awake. I began pulling on my clothes, signaling that our moment of closeness was over. It was clear to her that I was furious. Ty, please don't react this way, she pleaded. I still love you and you still love me. It's just this one time, and then it'll be over. In a week, everything will go back to the way it was and you'll forget about it. Forget about it? I snapped, disbelief dripping from my words. Who is this guy, Bree? Why are you trying to ruin everything we've built now when things are so good? She tightened the sash of her satin robe and replied, His name doesn't matter. It's not something you need to know, and I don't want you doing anything reckless. Besides, he's bigger than you, and he could hurt you if it came to that. Oh, trust me, I shot back. With my rage and a baseball bat, he wouldn't stand a chance. She sighed. It's just one night, Ty. He's leaving for New York on Sunday evening for good. He won't be back. He better leave, I growled, because if he doesn't, the next time he walks into court, it'll be on crutches. As my initial rage simmered, a deep sense of loss began to set in. Bree and I had been together for over 2 decades. She was my first and only lover. Temptations had come and gone, but I'd never acted on them. Now, this? How long has this been going on? I demanded. It's not a thing, she said, avoiding my gaze. We've barely touched. What does that even mean? Holding hands? Hugging? Kissing? Or more? I pressed, needing clarity. She stayed silent, which only confirmed my worst fears. If it had been something less passionate, she would have admitted it outright. Finally, she explained, he came to our firm about 6 months ago from a top New York law office to assist with a complex tax case. I worked closely with him, research, charts, graphs for court. Over time, we became close. 2 months ago, he told me he had feelings for me and wanted to sleep with me. But I didn't want to sneak off to some cheap motel or do something inappropriate at work. This was different. It needed to be special. He suggested I find a way to take a night away. I told him I couldn't lie to you. He asked if you might allow it just once. I wasn't sure, but I hoped you'd understand that this would only be a one-time thing and wouldn't change anything between us. Why? I demanded. Why would you risk everything we have? We're happy. We love each other. We have an incredible marriage, amazing kids, no financial worries, and our health. Why would you jeopardize that? She hesitated. Because my friend made me realize I've only ever been with you. He showed me what I might be missing. I just want to know what it's like. This will be enough. It'll make me feel whole. He cares about me, and I care about him. It's not some tawdry affair. But Bree, I protested, we have something rare and beautiful. You're the only woman I've ever been with, and I thought I was the only man you'd ever been with. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I need this. I want this. I want him. Why? I asked, desperate for a reason. She sighed deeply. He's so attractive, Ty. He's younger than me, but still finds me irresistible. I'm drawn to him in a way I can't explain. I just need to experience this, or I'll regret it forever. He feels the same way. Please, let me do this. Afterward, I'll be yours completely. I'll never agree to this, I replied firmly. It'll destroy us, Bree. It'll ruin our marriage. No, it won't, she insisted. Once it's over, I'll be the best wife you can imagine. I'll cook for you, keep the house immaculate, do the laundry, the shopping, everything. I'll be the perfect partner in every way, including the bedroom. You can have me anytime, however you want. I'll treat you like a king for the rest of our lives. I promise I'll never touch another man again. And I'll have to live with the fact that my wife slept with another man, I said bitterly. Do you know how humiliating that is for a man? It's the ultimate betrayal. You'll have to accept it, she said firmly. I'm going to do this, Ty. I need to. It won't change anything between us. You'll still love me, and I'll still love you. So that's what all the affection and attention over the last 2 months was about, I said coldly. It wasn't about us becoming empty nesters. You were trying to soften me up so I wouldn't push back on this insane idea. Well, guess what, Bree? That's not going to happen. Bree stood firm, unmoved by any of my arguments or objections. Her mind was made up and she wasn't going to reconsider. I didn't resort to pleading. She would have to deal with the fallout of her choices, whatever that might mean. I didn't yet know what consequences lay ahead. I went to our bedroom, packed a few items I'd need for the next day, grabbed my toiletries, and relocated to the guest room, which had its own attached bathroom in our spacious home. As I was moving my belongings, Bree tried to stop me. "Don't do this, Ty," she said. "Nothing's going to change. I know you're upset now, but by Sunday afternoon this will all be behind us. We'll go back to being us." I paused, meeting her gaze. "I'm not just upset, Bree," I replied, keeping my tone calm but resolute. "If you go through with this, we'll never be us again." I closed the guest room door without waiting for her response. Inside, I was left alone with my thoughts, which swirled chaotically. I considered all the possible responses: divorce, moving out, demanding that Bree leave, physically stopping her from going, even telling her parents or our kids. But none of these options felt right. I couldn't bring myself to divorce her. I still loved her, despite her lapse in judgment. I wasn't about to leave my own home either, and evicting her, while tempting, felt extreme. I also doubted that involving her family or ours would solve anything. If Bree chose to call off her plans, it needed to be her decision, not one coerced by outside pressure. Otherwise, it might just push her into being more secretive in the future. It was Thursday evening, and it was clear that Bree had waited until the last minute to tell me. This tactic limited the time I had to process, respond, or try to prevent her from following through. I was terrified. She admitted to having feelings for this man, and I couldn't help but wonder, was she considering leaving me now that the kids were out of the house? The thought shattered me. What if she found their night together more satisfying than our closeness? What if this opened the door to more? For 25 years, Bree and I had shared a comfortable, familiar closeness. There weren't many surprises left in our physical relationship, but I still found her incredibly attractive. Whether she wore a sleek black dress, a hot negligee, or just a towel, her body had never stopped exciting me. But now, as much as I feared the future, I started to consider ways to stop her. Could I somehow prevent her from going through with this? If her Prince Charming left town before they met, I'd have time to remind her of what she was risking. And maybe, just maybe, I could make sure she never entertained an idea like this again. Before I finally fell asleep late that night, I devised a plan. Talking Bree out of her decision seemed impossible, but perhaps her employer could intervene. I knew that Thomas, Dixon, and Harris, the law firm where Bree worked, had strict rules against workplace relationships. If I spoke to one of the senior partners about her situation, they might confront her about how her actions could affect her career. The next morning, I woke up first. Normally, I'd brew coffee for Bree before leaving for work, but not today. When she greeted me with a hesitant, "Good morning," I didn't reply in kind. All I said was, "Don't do this," before leaving the house without our usual goodbye kiss. I knew she noticed the shift in my behavior. Later that morning, I drove downtown to the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. Their firm occupied the top floor of a modern skyscraper. The reception area was as sleek and impressive as I remembered from past events, an open layout with plush seating, a fully stocked bar, and walls adorned with tasteful artwork. Seated at the central reception desk was Emily Stratton, the firm's office manager. Emily and I had crossed paths many times over the years at local events, and while we weren't close, we were friendly acquaintances. Despite being in her mid-50s, Emily carried herself with grace and poise. Her conservative attire never drew attention to her figure, but she had an understated elegance that didn't go unnoticed. With her golden hair always pulled into a bun and glasses perched on her nose, she exuded professionalism. Emily's face lit up when she saw me walk in. "Tyler, what a nice surprise," she said warmly, stepping out from behind her desk to greet me. She gave me a quick hug, her cheerful demeanor temporarily lifting my gloom. "Emily," I said with a faint smile, "I need to speak with Mr. Thomas. It's personal and important." Her expression grew serious. "This is about Brianna, isn't it?" she asked perceptively. I hesitated before answering vaguely. "Maybe." Emily nodded knowingly and adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Thomas is just finishing up a meeting," she said, checking his schedule. "He has about half an hour before he heads out for lunch with clients. I'll make sure he has a moment to talk with you." I thanked her and took a seat in the waiting area. A few minutes later, Emily brought me a cup of coffee. "I added a splash of Bailey's," she said with a wink. "You look like you need it." Her gesture of kindness brought a faint smile to my face, but my mind was still focused on the difficult conversation ahead. I only hoped that William Thomas could help me stop Bree before it was too late. Moments later, the intercom on Emily's desk buzzed. "I'm back in my office, Emily," came Mr. Thomas's voice. Emily seized the opportunity. "Mr. Thomas, Tyler Winslow is here. He's hoping to speak with you for a few minutes. It's important." There was a brief pause. Mr. Thomas replied thoughtfully. "If you think it's worth my time, send him in. I can spare about 5 minutes before my next appointment." Emily guided me through a pair of glass doors, down a short hallway, and to a large, intricately carved wooden door. She opened it, gesturing for me to step inside, and then closed it quietly behind me. The office was impressive, spacious and meticulously arranged. Mr. Thomas stood near his expansive desk, which was flanked by several chairs. On the opposite side of the room, a comfortable sitting area featured a sofa, an armchair, and a coffee table. The walls were adorned with framed degrees, awards, and plaques, underscoring his success. He stepped around the desk, extending his hand warmly. "Tyler, good to see you. How's life? Still in publishing?" "I'm doing okay," I replied, though my tone lacked enthusiasm. "Well, if Emily thinks it's important, it must be. What's on your mind?" As I stood there, I hesitated. The weight of the conversation suddenly felt overwhelming. Still, I forced myself to begin. "I hate to bring this to you, Mr. Thomas. Honestly, it's embarrassing." "What's going on, Ty?" he asked, his tone both curious and sincere. I took a deep breath. "My wife, Brianna, works here. She's told me she plans to spend Saturday night with one of your associates. I've tried everything to dissuade her, but she's adamant." Mr. Thomas, ever the sharp lawyer, grasped the situation immediately. "So, you're hoping I can step in? Maybe have a word with Brianna or this associate?" "That was my intention when I came here," I admitted. "But now I think I've made a mistake. This is my problem, and I need to handle it myself." He nodded slowly, considering my words. "You're aware, of course, that our firm has policies about workplace relationships, especially within the same department. Those policies exist to protect us from potential issues like conflicts of interest or legal liability." "Yes, I'm aware," I said quietly. Placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder, he continued. "Our fraternization policy isn't as robust as it should be. I've been meaning to tighten it, add clear consequences for violations. Unfortunately, I can't rewrite policy overnight, and certainly not before Saturday." I nodded, feeling a mix of frustration and resignation. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Thomas. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this. I need to figure out how to deal with it on my own." "Good luck, Ty," he said as I turned to leave. I stepped back into the reception area, where Emily was waiting with a curious look. "How did it go?" she asked. "It was a mistake to bring this to him," I admitted. "I feel foolish." Emily gave me a kind smile. "You're being too hard on yourself. Sit down and take a moment. I'll bring you another coffee or something stronger if you'd prefer." I sank into one of the plush chairs in the waiting area, running my hands over my face as my thoughts raced. I felt defeated, completely out of options. Bree seemed determined to go through with her plans, and I didn't know how to stop her. Overwhelmed, I leaned forward, my head in my hands. Emily's cheerful voice broke through my despair. "Come on, Ty, let's go to lunch. My treat." I hesitated, but the idea of stepping away and clearing my head was appealing. I agreed, and Emily arranged for a colleague to cover for her while she took an extended break. As we walked to a nearby restaurant she liked, she linked her arm with mine in a gesture of support. Over iced tea, Emily gently encouraged me to open up. I hesitated, but eventually I told her everything. She listened quietly, nodding at the right moments. After we ordered, she chose soup and half a sandwich while I picked at a Caesar salad. Our conversation shifted to lighter topics. When we finished eating, Emily ordered coffee for both of us, and we sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Emily broke the silence with something unexpected. "Did you know my late husband was a fighter pilot?" "I knew you were widowed," I replied, "but I didn't know he was a pilot." Her expression softened. "Joe was my hero. We married right after he graduated from the Air Force Academy. He flew A-10S, the Warthog, as they call it. He served 2 tours in the Middle East before he was tragically eliminated in a training accident." I listened as she recounted his service, including the honors he received: the Silver Star, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and 2 Bronze Stars. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, but there was pride in her words. "Joe used to tell me about air combat strategies," she continued. One scenario stuck with me. When facing a single enemy fighter, a two-plane formation would split up. The enemy had to pick a target, pursue one, and leave the other free to attack, or try to target both and fail. Either way, the enemy lost. Emily's story intrigued me, though I wasn't sure what she was driving at. "Are you talking about Bree's date?" I asked. She smiled, her eyes sharp with meaning. "Give her a choice, Ty. No matter what she chooses, make sure you win." Her words hung in the air as she reached across the table, gently taking my hand. Her smile was disarming, filled with quiet encouragement, and for the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. After lunch with Emily, I went back to the office, immersing myself in work to avoid going home to Bree. The thought of spending an evening in her company, pretending everything was normal, felt unbearable. Later, I stopped by the Iris Club, a cozy spot where I could enjoy a few drinks with friends and momentarily distract myself. It was almost 10 p.m. when I finally returned home, and Bree was waiting for me, her frustration evident. "You didn't even bother to call," she said, her tone sharp. "I went out of my way to make a nice dinner for us. It's sitting in the fridge. I was hoping we could spend some time together tonight, maybe even reconnect. And now I can smell the booze on you." "Yes, I had a few drinks," I replied bluntly. "I stayed out because I didn't want to face this situation tonight. I needed to forget, just for a little while, about what you're planning tomorrow." I headed toward the guest room without waiting for her response. "I'm tired and going to bed." Her voice followed me down the hallway. "Don't worry, Ty. Tomorrow will come and go, and this will all be behind us. We'll go back to how things were before." I didn't reply. I simply shut the door, stripped to my boxers, and collapsed onto the guest bed, exhaustion and frustration weighing heavily on me. The next morning, I was up early. I downed a quick breakfast, just coffee and toast, and headed outside to work on the yard. Mowing the lawn, pulling weeds, and tidying up the space gave me something to focus on. When I came back inside, sweaty and tired, Bree was getting ready to head out. "I've got a spa appointment," she announced nonchalantly. "Manicure, pedicure, the whole thing. I'll be back in a few hours." I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her. "Bree, don't do this," I said quietly but firmly. "It won't end the way you think it will." She paused briefly but didn't respond, disappearing through the door and leaving me alone once again. When she returned later that afternoon, it was clear she'd gone all out. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant style, her nails painted a bold, vibrant red. She looked radiant, too radiant. I could tell she was preparing for something special. Meanwhile, I'd been busy as well. The living room had been transformed, the furniture rearranged, and the rug rolled up to reveal an open space. Bree stopped in her tracks, taking in the room. "What's going on, Ty? Why is the rug rolled up, and why is the coffee table pushed to the side?" "I made room for dancing," I said casually. "I thought we could have a romantic evening together." She crossed her arms, skepticism etched across her face. "What are you trying to pull?" "Nothing underhanded," I replied. "I just want to show you that staying home tonight would be the better choice. Let me show you something." I gestured toward the dining room. Reluctantly, she followed me. I'd set the table with meticulous care, using our best china, crystal glasses, and silver flatware. A bouquet of roses sat in the center, flanked by 2 tall candles, their warm glow creating an passionate atmosphere. It was the kind of table you'd find in a high-end restaurant. "Ty," she said slowly, her voice firm, "I see what you're doing, but it's not going to work. You know I already have plans tonight." "I know what your plans are," I said evenly. "But plans can change. Sometimes something better comes along. Are you really going to disappoint me for him?" "Ty, don't do this to yourself," she said, shaking her head. Ignoring her words, I led her to the kitchen where the evening's menu was already underway. "Let me walk you through what I've prepared," I began. "We'll start with a chilled green gazpacho, garnished with chopped yellow tomatoes and cucumber. Then, a crisp salad of iceberg lettuce with avocado and bacon, drizzled with ranch dressing. To cleanse the palate, I've made a lime sorbet." "Ty, stop," she said softly. "You're putting so much effort into this, and it's not going to change my mind," I continued, undeterred. "The main course is a pork chop stuffed with rice and herbs, finished with a béarnaise sauce. On the side, asparagus sautéed with garlic butter and creamy potato gratin. For dessert, a scoop of vanilla ice cream with green crème de menthe. We'll finish with coffee and your choice of liqueur." Bree sighed, exasperation mingled with guilt. "It sounds amazing, but I'm leaving tonight. I even bought a new dress for the occasion." She turned and headed upstairs. I heard the shower running as I went to our bedroom to change. I put on a pair of black pants, a fitted black shirt, and leather dance shoes. A formal suit seemed unnecessary for a dinner at home. When Bree came downstairs, my heart sank. She was stunning. Her black dress hugged her figure perfectly, with a neckline that drew attention to her décolletage. The hemline stopped modestly above her knees, but the slit along the side climbed daringly high, revealing a glimpse of her stocking tops as she moved. Her heels, adorned with delicate diamond-studded straps, added the finishing touch. "How do I look?" she asked, spinning slightly to show off the ensemble. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but I kept my tone calm. "You look incredible," I said, forcing a tight smile. "Like you're dressed to impress someone, but not me." "It's a special night, Ty. I wanted to look my best. Don't worry, I'll wear this for you another time," she said dismissively, walking past me toward the door. As I flipped through the radio stations, George Michael's Careless Whisper came on, a song that always pulled at my emotions. I turned up the volume, letting the familiar melody wash over me. "Can I have one last dance before you go?" I asked softly. Bree hesitated for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. "All right, just one." I walked over, gently took her hand, and pulled her into a slow embrace. We swayed to the rhythm, her body close against mine. The scent of her perfume was achingly familiar, stirring memories of better times. "You're wearing English leather," she murmured, a faint smile on her lips. "I know it's your favorite," I replied. As the song reached its final verses, I trailed soft kisses along her cheek and down her neck. She sighed, her response almost instinctive, a gentle sound of contentment. Encouraged, I slid my hand to the strap of her dress, easing it off her shoulder while kissing her neck. She froze, pulling back abruptly. "No, Ty, don't. You know I'm leaving tonight. We can do this another time." I held her gaze for a moment, my voice low and steady. "It's not too late to change your mind." Her expression hardened. "I'm not changing my plans, Ty. I told you I'm going on this date, and I don't want you to ruin it." Exhaling slowly, I stepped back. "All right, Bree, I won't interfere anymore. You've made your choice, and I see it's final. But before you walk out that door, there are two things I want you to do." Suspicion flickered across her face. "What are they?" "First," I said, gesturing toward the dining room, "I want you to see what I've done. Look at the table I set for us tonight. I want you to remember it as you walk out." I lit the candles and dimmed the lights, bathing the room in a soft golden glow. The scene was passionate and romantic, a picture of what could have been. Bree glanced at the setup and shrugged. "We can have a romantic dinner another time, Ty." I stepped closer, took her left hand, and carefully slid off her wedding and engagement rings. "Second, I don't want you touching him while wearing the rings I gave you. These are symbols of us, and you're choosing to leave them behind tonight." Her eyes widened slightly as I placed the rings, along with my own wedding band, on the small hallway table. For a moment, she looked uncomfortable, even guilty. "Okay," she said quietly. As Bree reached for her shawl and clutch, the doorbell rang. Both of us turned toward the sound, surprised. Through the frosted glass, a figure stood silhouetted. "Who could that be at this hour?" she muttered, moving to open the door. When she did, her voice caught in a mix of surprise and confusion. "Emily? What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, taking Emily's hand and guiding her inside. Bree's eyes darted to Emily's outfit, a striking cocktail dress far removed from her usual conservative work attire. The scarlet dress clung to Emily's curves, with off-the-shoulder straps tied in delicate bows. Her legs were accentuated by French-style red stockings, and her updo was decorated with a ribbon matching her dress. "Ty invited me," Emily said smoothly, her gaze drifting to the candlelit dining table. "He promised me an evening of romance, dinner by candlelight, slow dancing, and cozying up by the fireplace. How could I say no?" Bree's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. "You look so different from how you dress at work," she blurted out. Emily smirked, adjusting the strap of her dress. "I like to dress up for special occasions. And you look stunning, too. That dress will be fun for Stanley to take off." Bree froze. "Stanley? How do you know about him?" Emily laughed lightly, her tone almost mocking. "Oh, everyone in the paralegal department knows about Stanley. The tax department, too. Stanley isn't exactly subtle." Bree's cheeks flushed. "We tried to be discreet." "Discreet?" Emily interrupted with a laugh. "From the moment Stanley arrived, He made his intentions obvious, and you didn't resist. Shorter skirts, plunging necklines, more makeup, and his favorite perfume. Honestly, you were an open book. Bree looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. It was supposed to be harmless, just a little flirting. Then I got caught up in it. I thought it would be just one night. I stepped forward, draping her shawl over her shoulders and guiding her toward the door. One night, huh? Fine. Go, but don't come back until tomorrow morning. I've given you every chance to stay with me, but you chose him. Bree hesitated for a moment, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. I'll be back, she said quietly as she stepped onto the porch. Have fun tonight, I said, closing the door behind her. For a moment, I stood in silence, hearing her car pull away. My chest felt heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Things would never be the same again. Emily approached, her expression softening. I can't imagine how you feel, Ty, she said gently. But remember, no matter what choice Bree makes, you've already won. She reached up, cupping my face in her hands. Her lips met mine, a gentle, reassuring kiss that slowly deepened. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her closer as the kiss became more passionate. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavily. Let's not waste the evening, Emily said with a small smile. Show me this dinner you've prepared. I told Emily that dinner wasn't quite ready, but invited her to help if she felt like it. She agreed with a smile, following me into the kitchen. I pointed to 3 open bottles of wine, a crisp Chardonnay, a bold Cabernet, and a sweeter dessert option. She chose the Chardonnay. After pouring her a glass and tasting it myself, I playfully slipped an apron over her head and tied it around her waist. Standing behind her, I gave her a quick kiss, which made her laugh. What's my assignment, chef? She asked, clearly enjoying herself. I've already baked half a pound of bacon, I said. I need you to cut 5 strips into 1-inch pieces and mix them with the chopped iceberg lettuce. Then, dice the avocado and add it to the mix. While Emily worked, sipping her wine and chatting lightly, a sudden wave of self-doubt crept in. I glanced at her, the most stunning woman I'd ever been close to, and couldn't shake the thought that I might not measure up. My entire life I'd only been with one woman, Bree, while Emily might have had far more experience. The thought unnerved me. I stepped up behind her, gently placing my hands on her waist. I've only ever made love to Bree, I confessed quietly. It makes me worry that I won't be good enough for you. Emily paused and leaned back against me, her tone reassuring. Ty, you have nothing to worry about. Just treat me the way you'd treat Bree, and let's see where it goes. If I want something different, I'll tell you, and if there's something you want, just say so. Whatever it is. She turned her head slightly and added with a playful smile. And, by the way, I love foreplay. I kissed the back of her head, feeling a flicker of confidence return. Thanks. Have you ever been a cheerleader? You sure know how to inspire someone. She laughed. The salad's done, she announced, taking the bowl into the dining room. I followed, pulling out her chair and helping her sit before taking my own seat at the head of the table. Before starting, I refilled our glasses and raised mine for a toast. To an unforgettable night, she said, her eyes sparkling. I'll drink to that, I replied. Dinner unfolded beautifully. I served each course, and Emily complimented every dish, calling it a 5-star meal that could rival any fine dining experience. When dessert was finished, I told her to relax in the family room while I tidied up. Once the dining area was spotless, I joined her. The soft sounds of rain and distant thunder played on the stereo, creating a soothing backdrop. Emily was gently swaying to the music, lost in the moment. When I approached, she held out her hands, inviting me to dance. We moved together slowly, the closeness of the moment deepening. This is perfect, Ty, she murmured. It's been so long since I felt this romantic. I feel the same, I admitted. After a moment of silence, she added, For what it's worth, I haven't been with a man in years. And when I have, it's only been with men I truly liked. I really like you, Ty. That's good to know, I said, pulling her a little closer. If I tell you I love you at some point tonight, don't be mad. I'll mean it, at least for as long as we're together. And when this ends, I hope we can stay close. The music slowed, and so did we, eventually just holding each other. Her arms were around my neck, mine resting on her waist. Her breath was warm against my skin as she ran her fingers through the hair at the back of my neck. I felt her body pressed against mine, her curves, her warmth. She must have felt my reaction, too. I leaned down and began to kiss her neck and collarbone, savoring her soft sighs. As the moment intensified, Emily gently stepped back. "Give me a few minutes to change into something more comfortable," she said with a teasing smile. "Feel free to do the same. Let's meet by the fireplace." I went to my room, slipping into black silk pajama pants and a matching t-shirt. Pouring myself a coffee with a splash of Bailey's, I settled on the couch to wait. A few minutes later, I heard her approach. Before I could turn, Emily's arms wrapped around the back of the couch. Her hands slid under my shirt, and she kissed my neck, sending a jolt of warmth through me. I turned onto my back, looking up at her. She stood there in a black satin robe, the fabric loosely tied at the waist. Beneath it, I could see the delicate lace of a negligee. Her hair was down, framing her face, and her legs were bare. I reached for her hand, pulling her over the back of the couch. She landed on me with a laugh, her robe parting slightly. I couldn't resist leaning up to kiss her. What started as a gentle kiss quickly deepened, her lips parting as we shared a passionate embrace. My hands roamed over her back, slipping the robe off her shoulders to reveal her smooth skin and the soft fabric of her negligee. She was breathtaking. I let the robe slide down her arms until it pooled on the floor, leaving her in just the negligee that clung to her figure. I kissed her again, losing myself in the moment, unable to resist her allure. As my kisses moved lower, I traced a path down Emily's body, lingering at her navel before continuing to her thighs. She began to writhe beneath me, her breathing quick and shallow. "I love you, Ty," she whispered between breaths. "I love you too, Emily," I replied, my words barely breaking the rhythm of the moment. I didn't want this night to end. I knew it would be the last time we shared something so passionate, and it seemed Emily felt the same. Tears slipped from her eyes as she clung to me. I held her tightly, kissing her lips, her face, and her neck as though trying to hold on to the moment. Eventually, we both sighed, the reality of dawn drawing the night to a close. I stepped out of the shower first, giving Emily time to finish while I dried off and dressed in casual clothes. She emerged moments later, and I handed her a soft, oversized towel. She had brought a change of clothes, and soon we were both ready to leave the house. "Do you want to grab brunch?" I asked. Her face lit up, and she nodded. "I'd love that." We headed to a nearby cheesecake factory in a bustling shopping center. It was just opening when we arrived at 10 a.m., and we lingered over coffee and conversation before heading back. By the time I returned home around noon, Bree's car was already in the garage. I entered through the side door, passing through the kitchen, where I noticed a pot of coffee on the stove. Pouring myself a cup, I made my way to the dining room and found Bree seated at the table, a coffee cup in front of her. Her posture was rigid, her expression stern. In contrast, I felt calm, almost smug. A faint smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. It was time to address the elephant in the room. "So," I began, "how was your evening?" "Fine," Bree replied flatly, her tone guarded. "And yours?" she asked pointedly. "Honestly," I said, leaning back with a satisfied grin, "it was incredible. Emily was affectionate and eager, and we spent the night exploring ways to make each other happy." Bree lowered her head, and I saw a single tear roll down her cheek. Guilt surged through me. This wasn't the victory it had seemed in the moment. It felt more like the biggest mistake of my life. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Didn't Stanley live up to your expectations?" "It wasn't Stanley," she snapped, then softened. "It was me. I couldn't stop thinking about you and Emily, about what you were doing together. She's so beautiful, so alluring. I knew you'd have a better time with her than I ever could with Stanley." She took a deep breath before continuing. "He tried to be gentle, to make the night romantic, but I couldn't focus." I started drinking wine at the bar before dinner. By the time we sat down, I'd already had too much. I barely touched my food, I couldn't eat, and just kept drinking. Stanley tried to stop me, suggested we dance in the living room to lighten the mood, but I was tipsy and clumsy. He grew frustrated and said we should go upstairs. She hesitated, her voice shaking. In the room, he kissed me, but it felt wrong. Then he started undressing me, and I didn't resist. I let him, but I felt nothing. No excitement, no connection. He could tell. When it was over, he looked at me with disappointment and said, "That was the worst experience of my life. What's wrong with you? You wanted this, and now you're acting like you don't care." He got dressed and left, muttering something about finding someone else at the bar. I just lay there and cried myself to sleep. Her voice grew quieter. When I woke up, it was morning. The sun was shining, and I felt empty. I showered, dressed, and left the hotel. I wanted to come home and talk to you, but you weren't here. Emily and I went to brunch, I said plainly. She went home afterward. I'll admit, I'm sorry your night didn't go as planned, but I'm not entirely sorry. Mine did. Bree's eyes filled with fresh tears. I'm so sorry, Ty, she said earnestly. I regret ever getting involved with Stanley. Now I see it for what it was. He just wanted to use me. He never cared about me. I leaned back, my tone sharp. Well, maybe you'll have better luck next time. There won't be a next time, she said quickly, her voice breaking. I'll never do this again. I want us to go back to being monogamous, to the way things were before. I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the wife you deserve. Not so fast, Bree, I said firmly. You've spent months building an emotional relationship with him and weeks plotting this night together. Now that it's blown up in your face, you want me to forget everything and pretend it never happened? That's not how this works. I'm not even sure I want to stay married to you. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and tried to turn me into a fool. And now you expect me to forgive and forget like nothing happened? No, Bree. It doesn't work like that. Bree sat silently, tears streaming down her face as the weight of my words hung in the air. Bree's eyes searched mine, filled with a mixture of desperation and hope, but I continued without hesitation. Next year, I'm making some changes for myself. I'm getting a gym membership, and once a month, I'll take myself out on a date with whoever I choose. If those dates lead to something more, so be it. At the end of the year, I'll reassess our marriage. If I decide it's no longer working for me, I'll file for divorce. If I find I'm happy, I'll consider becoming exclusive with you again. You'll have this year to prove that staying together is worth it. Take it or leave it. If you can't accept these terms, I'll start divorce proceedings on Monday. Let me know your decision. Bree's voice trembled as she began to speak. Ty, I love you. I know I've taken you for granted, and I regret it deeply. The thought of you being with another woman would liquidate me, just like last night did. But losing you entirely, that would destroy me. I'll agree to your conditions. And I promise I'll spend this year showing you I can be the best wife you've ever dreamed of. By the end of it, I'll make sure you'll never want to leave me. Then it's settled, I said simply. The rest of the day passed without incident. I spent some time working in the yard and running errands. Before heading out, I offered her an olive branch. If you clean up the mess from last night and straighten up the house, I'll take you out to TGI Fridays for dinner. We can split a plate of ribs. It wasn't much, but it was my way of trying to restore some normalcy. As the probationary year began, Bree seemed to embrace her role wholeheartedly. She became an attentive and doting wife, and her efforts felt genuine. Our meals improved dramatically. Dinner often featured a small salad or soup, a hearty main course like steak with potatoes or vegetables, and even dessert. Each meal was accompanied by a glass of wine. Afterward, we worked together to clean up. Our closeness also intensified, becoming more frequent and passionate. Bree made it clear there was nothing she wouldn't do to rekindle the spark between us. One evening, over a particularly good dinner, Bree broke the silence with a casual remark. I spoke to Emily today. I tried to keep my expression neutral. Oh, what about? Bree smiled faintly. You, me, and her. What did she say? I asked, my curiosity piqued. Well, Bree began, the first thing she did was invite me to lunch. She took me to one of her favorite restaurants nearby. Over a couple of glasses of wine and some salad, I asked her point blank if she planned to take you away from me. She laughed and said, Absolutely not. Ty and I were a one-time thing. We're best friends now, but we'll never be together like that again. If anything, I think he's still upset about how hurt he was by your actions. Bree hesitated, then continued. I told her how ashamed I am of what I did to you and to our marriage. I also told her about your decision to date other women once a month and reevaluate our relationship at the end of the year. And what was her advice? I asked. She said, don't try to compete with other women. Instead, make staying home with you so irresistible that he won't want to go on those dates. Turn your home into the better option. That's exactly what I plan to do. If that's your strategy, I replied with a small grin, don't be surprised if I set up a fake date just to see what you've got planned. A few weeks later, I found myself walking into the offices of Thomas, Dixon, and Harris with a smile on my face. Emily, as usual, was stationed at her desk, guarding the entrance to the partners' offices. When she saw me, her face lit up. She stood and walked over to greet me, wrapping me in a warm hug. Ty, it's great to see you, she said warmly. We've been expecting you, or rather, Mr. Thomas has. As I held her briefly, I asked, any idea what he wants to talk to me about? Emily smirked. Of course I know everything that happens here. but it's better if you hear it from him." She returned to her desk and buzzed Mr. Thomas. After a brief exchange, she gestured for me to follow her, leading me to his office and opening the large, carved wooden door. She gave me a quick smile before closing it behind me. "Ty," Mr. Thomas greeted warmly, standing and extending his hand. "Good to see you again. Please, have a seat." I took the chair opposite him, and he leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I wanted to talk to you for two reasons, both of which directly or indirectly involve you." He paused for a moment before continuing. "First, I thought you'd like to know that we've updated our company's fraternization policy. It's much more comprehensive now. It explicitly outlines the consequences of workplace relationships, whether between employees or employees and clients. I've got a copy here for you to review at your leisure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it." I thanked Mr. Thomas for addressing the issue I had brought to his attention previously. His thoughtfulness and initiative had not gone unnoticed. "Ty," he said, his tone considerate, "without prying too much, how are things at home? I genuinely hope you and Bree are finding your way forward." He paused briefly before adding, "I visited Bree's department a few days ago. We didn't talk about anything personal, strictly work-related matters. I wanted to check on her team's progress and see if there were any challenges I could help with. From what I observed, she seemed happy and at ease. Not wanting to delve into the current state of my marriage, I kept my response simple. Things are improving, and I'm optimistic that we'll be all right in the long run." Mr. Thomas smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that," he said. "Now let me tell you the second reason I wanted to speak with you today. It concerns a letter I sent to Hughes, Duvet, and Lewis, the firm where Stanley Wilbur is employed. Despite everything, Stanley did provide excellent assistance with a particularly complex tax issue we faced. His expertise was instrumental, and I made sure to acknowledge that. However," he added, lifting a piece of paper from his desk, "I also felt compelled to address another, less favorable aspect of his behavior. I thought you might want to hear what I wrote." Adjusting his glasses, Mr. Thomas began to read aloud. "Dear Steve, you have already received an official performance report regarding Stanley Wilbur's contributions to Thomas, Dixon, and Harris. His knowledge and expertise were invaluable in resolving a challenging tax case, and he went above and beyond by equipping our attorneys with skills to manage similar cases in the future. However, this letter is informal and private, intended to share a different perspective. While Stanley demonstrated commendable technical abilities, his personal conduct during his time here was problematic. He initiated a relationship with one of our married employees, which escalated to physical involvement. This inappropriate relationship caused significant turmoil in the employee's personal life, straining her marriage to the point where its future remains uncertain. Lawyers already contend with a less-than-stellar reputation in the public eye, often seen as valuing profit over ethics or winning over justice. In this profession, integrity is paramount. Stanley's actions raise concerns about his personal honesty, which could very well extend to his professional behavior. With this in mind, I urge you to monitor the work Stanley performs at your firm carefully. While this letter is strictly between us, I trust you'll take whatever action you believe is appropriate, or none at all. The choice is yours. Sincerely, William." Mr. Thomas folded the paper and set it aside. "This letter doesn't capture everything Stanley put you and Bree through, but it ensures that his actions won't come without repercussions. I doubt this will help him advance in his career, at least not as quickly as he might hope. This is the best I can do for you, Ty," he continued. "I hope it brings some sense of closure, knowing that Stanley won't escape unscathed." I nodded, gratitude evident in my expression. "Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Your support means a lot to me." As I left his office, I found myself lost in thought, processing the conversation. I didn't even notice Emily standing nearby until she gently interrupted. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked softly, studying my face. I took a moment before replying. "Honestly, I feel good about how it's all played out. Things are starting to come together. I can't thank you enough for being there for me through all of this." Emily smiled warmly and pulled me into a tight hug. "Don't forget, Ty," she said softly. "I've grown from this too. I really did love you while we were together." "And I loved you too," I replied, my voice steady yet filled with emotion.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Ben Harris.
I'm a 42-year-old manager at a construction firm in Los Angeles. I met my wife, Kathy, 12 years ago when she was 21, working as a file clerk just outside my office. What caught my attention first were the tight jeans she wore that hugged her hips perfectly. She was young, attractive, and left quite an impression. At the time, I had been divorced from my first wife for about 4 years and had no children. I always wanted kids, though, and with Kathy working nearby and handling the project files, it felt like things just fell into place. We started having lunch together, and after a few weeks, I invited her to spend the weekend with me. It was a great weekend, good company, good chemistry, and we started dating seriously after that. A couple of months passed before Kathy told me she was pregnant. I was excited but also direct. I asked her if she wanted an abortion or if she wanted to get married. She didn't want an abortion, so the next weekend, we had a small, private wedding. I was thrilled. At 30, I felt ready to start a family, to be a dad, and I wanted to be young enough to enjoy every part of my kids' lives. But something shifted in Kathy after that. She became quiet, withdrawn, and pregnancy was not something she enjoyed. At the time, I thought maybe it was just the strain of carrying a child, but I later realized it was more than that. Kathy had married me not because she wanted to build a family, but to escape her mother's house. She had no real interest in having children and had even aborted 2 pregnancies from a previous relationship. That was something I didn't learn until much later. About 3 months before the birth of our first son, Kathy quit her job to become a full-time homemaker and prepare for motherhood. Our second and third sons arrived shortly after, and within 3.5 years, we had 3 healthy, energetic boys. With 3 young kids to look after, Kathy was constantly busy and often exhausted by the time I got home from work. I truly appreciated her dedication as a mom, but as her energy for parenting increased, her desire for intimacy seemed to fade. The gradual decline in our physical relationship left me feeling a bit on edge. I noticed that Kathy's attitude began to change when she turned 30. The kids were now all in grade school, and I had assumed Kathy would be able to relax a bit more and pay more attention to me. Unfortunately, our sex life continued to remain at a low ebb. I never really knew what Kathy was doing during the day with the kids in school. I looked back at what my mom used to do: cleaning the house, doing the laundry, shopping for food and the kids' clothes, taking the kids to soccer practice. I assumed Kathy's day would be pretty much the same as what I had seen my mom do. One day, Kathy approached me after dinner and told me she would like to find a part-time job. She said she was getting bored staying at home by herself during the day. I was a little concerned because I didn't see how she could make lunches, get the kids off to school, clean house, do the laundry, take the kids to soccer practice, go shopping, and still find the time for a job. I was worried that her health may suffer from plain exhaustion. Kathy spent a few weeks looking, and then by word of mouth found a part-time job as a bookkeeper for a small local gym. She told me that she would be given a free membership and would only work from 8 a.m. until noon. This would allow her to get the kids off to school and come home after work to do the necessary chores before the kids got home. She told me that if there was ever an emergency at school, the school could reach her at work, and she would only be 10 minutes away. Kathy's appeared to have thought this out carefully, and I could find no flaw in her logic. So I told her, go for it. Kathy started work and seemed to get an emotional lift from having to interface with adults at work. Things seemed to settle into a well-established routine, and Kathy's demeanor substantially improved. A few months after she started work, Kathy approached me with a request to take advantage of the gym's free membership. She wanted to go to the gym early in the morning from 4:30 a.m. to 6 a.m. to exercise, then come back home to get the kids off to school, and then head off to work at 8 a.m. Because of my commute, I had to leave the house at 6:30 a.m., so I really didn't see any conflict with the family's overall schedule. A few months went by and I began to notice Kathy getting her old figure back. She had dropped 20 pounds and was now carrying 120 pounds on her 5 feet minus 4 inches frame. When I complimented her on her efforts, she surprised me by telling me she felt her boobs were too small. She told me she wanted breast enhancements to make her boobs perky again. I realized after having 3 kids, she deserved the implants, especially if it would improve our stale sex life. Kathy got her implants, and it took her a couple of weeks to fully recover. Apparently, the surgeon inserted the implants through her armpits to make them look and feel more realistic. He did a very good job, and she was ecstatic with the results. Kathy again returned to her part-time job and early morning workouts. Things got back into the groove of everyday family life. But that was soon to change dramatically. It was early Saturday morning and I was cleaning out Kathy's car. As I took out the floor mat on the driver's side, I noticed a small cellophane bag underneath the car seat. I pulled out the small bag and noticed it was partially filled with white powder. I had no idea what was in the bag, but the possibility that the bag contained drugs crossed my mind. I began to get an uneasy feeling. Where would Kathy get drugs? Could the drugs belong to a friend? What in the hell was going on? What was Kathy doing during the day? I decided not to tell Kathy what I had found. I needed time to think things out and talk to an old friend who lived life walking on the fence. If the substance in the bag was a drug, my bud Timothy would know. That afternoon, I asked Kathy if she could take the kids to their soccer games because I needed to get an oil change for my car. I told her I would be back in a couple hours. I left the house and headed across town to Timothy's apartment. Just as I was about to knock on Timothy's door, the door opened and Timothy bent down to grab his newspaper. It had been a couple of years and Timothy was surprised to see me. I told him the kids, family life, and weekend soccer games was keeping me busy and chasing skirts with my old single buds was probably not practical. When he laughed, I told him I needed a favor. He told me, that's what friends are for. I entered his apartment and I showed him what I had found under Kathy's car seat. He opened the bag, wet his index finger, and tapped the white substance. He brought out a small amount on his fingertip, looked at it, and touched it to his tongue. Timothy casually said, "Meth?" I stood there stunned. What was Kathy doing with meth? And who had given it to her? I must have looked bewildered for Timothy told me to sit down. Timothy saw the look in my face and asked me about Kathy. I told him she was working part-time as a bookkeeper at a local gym. He laughed and said, gyms were a haven for drugs. Steroids, meth, and cocaine were the usual suspects, and the most trainers wind up banging their housewife clients. It is very common. But he mentioned this may just be the tip of the iceberg of Kathy's shenanigans. I started to get a sinking feeling in my stomach. I think Timothy saw the blood drain from my face. Timothy looked at me and said, "You need to hire a PI. They will be discreet and are professionals. If you follow her and find her having sex with some guy, what are you going to do? Punch the guy out and get arrested for battery. And you may even lose the fight and give him a get-out-of-jail-free card to beat the hell out of you claiming self-defense? Punch her out and get arrested for felony spousal abuse? You're the one who would go to jail, and you're the one who would suffer as Big Bubas's bitch. All you would do is leave the door wide open for Kathy to continue her affair, and she would probably have the guy move into your home while you were in jail. When you got out, you would have nothing. California is a no-fault state, so her adultery would be ignored. But it gets worse. If you could not support her and your kids because you were incarcerated, the courts would take your 401k and retirement funds to use for spousal and child support. And remember, there is nothing to stop you wife from using those funds to support her lover. You would have effectively thrown away your life up to this point. When you are finally released from prison, you would carry the stigma of being an ex-con to every potential employer you contact. Unless you can start your own business, which is highly unlikely, you will be forced to take a job, if you can even find one, at a fraction of the pay of your current position. Timothy went on, "We have been friends for a long time, so I want you to hire a PI, and I want you to bring me all the information he finds. If she is taking drugs, you need to get her into a rehab facility for the sake of your children and the stability of their home. However, if she has committed adultery and you have done nothing to encourage that particular behavior, then she has lost respect for you and has disregarded the welfare of her children. If that is the case, you will never gain back her respect, and you need to take the kind of action that will allow you to walk away from this situation with your pride and your balls intact. No woman is ever sorry she cheated on her husband. She is only sorry that she got caught. A woman who is unfaithful fully intended her actions. She knew exactly what she is doing. It is a selfish act that totally disregards the feelings of her husband and family. And remember, the next time for her gets easier and easier. However, if she was drugged, then she was not cheating, but she was involuntarily assaulted." Timothy continued, "Women are different than men. From their late 20s to their late 30s, women's hormones are running wild. They are at the same runaway hormone level as an 18-year-old guy. Any woman who has been married for a few years and hits that cycle is looking for a new sex partner. Whether they successfully find it is another question. With the divorce rate in the Los Angeles basin at 65%, with 85% instigated by the wife, for first marriages and 80% for second marriages, and with an overall female infidelity rate of 50%, equates to a lot of wives screwing on their first and second husbands with no remorse. It appears that few women learn their lesson, but most continue their infidelity in subsequent marriages. Remember, not only does it get easier and easier, but the grass is always greener on the other side of the hill until you have to mow the lawn. Well, Ben, that is why I stayed single. I just saw too much in my line of work as a PI. With the divorce laws the way they are, men, in general, are fighting an uphill battle. And remember, Ben, it is a war to get the upper hand. Men don't marry partners. They marry adversaries and spend the rest of their lives suffering in silence. I left Timothy's apartment that afternoon shaken to the core. I took the business card of the PI Timothy handed me. I would call the PI Monday. I wasn't going to be emotional and mentally abused by anyone's runaway hormones. 2 weeks later, I stared in disbelief at the PI's report. Apparently, Kathy was meeting a trainer from the gym during her early morning workout. They had a routine worked out where they met at 4:30 a.m., spent a half hour screwing in the back of her car, and then went in for a workout when the gym opened at 5 a.m. It had never occurred to me to check what time the gym opened. I felt like an idiot. I had trusted her, and she had deceived me and the kids. I was not sad, nor was I heartbroken. I was experiencing ice-cold rage. The trainer turned out to be a small-time drug dealer who dealt in steroids and meth. I called Timothy and told him I would be stopping by with the PI's report. The drive through cross-town traffic was miserable. 45 minutes later, I was ringing Timothy's door. Timothy opened the door, invited me in, and motioned me to sit down. Timothy slowly digested the PI's report and gently handed it back to me. He told me to listen very carefully. First, Timothy said, you must not do anything that will make her suspicious. It is imperative that she does not suspect you know anything. This coming Monday, I want you to. I work early Monday around 4:15 a.m. Kathy was just getting out of the shower and went over to put on her gym shorts and top. I wondered if she was even wearing panties. Probably not. I lay in our bed pretending to be asleep. Once she went downstairs, I quietly got out of bed, slipped into my clothes and waited until I heard the garage door open. I heard the garage door close and I quickly went downstairs, put on my gloves, grabbed my camera with a telephoto lens, and went into the garage. I opened the truck to my car and pulled out Kathy's original plastic bag and 2 additional plastic bags of meth that Timothy had given me on my last visit. I took the bags and my camera, laid them on the passenger seat of my car, opened the garage and headed down the road towards Kathy's gym. As I approached the gym, I killed my lights and parked about 50 yards away from the gym's parking lot. I picked up my camera, the 3 bags of plastic, and exited the car. As I approached the parking lot under the cover of the bushes, I noticed Kathy's car parked a slot away from an older Ford Bronco. I couldn't see anyone in the Bronco, but I did notice some movement in the backseat of Kathy's car. I crept up to the Bronco and slowly opened the driver's door and tossed 2 of the plastic bags into the passenger's seat. I then kept low and snuck around the front of the Bronco and tossed the last plastic bag on the ground by the backseat of Kathy's car. I looked up and I could see Kathy's head by the far window. She getting pounded doggy style by a male I had never met. I assumed it was her trainer. I crept back out of the parking lot and went around the corner. I pulled out the untraceable cell phone I had purchased with 30 minutes of time and dialed 911. I gave the operator a fake name, the address of the gym, and told her that I was witnessing a rape and child abduction in progress. I told her the male suspect may be armed. I ran across the street and hid in the bushes poised with my camera and telephoto lens. In less than 3.5 minutes, 2 squad cars pulled up without their sirens and with their headlights off. Simultaneously, they drove into the parking lot and turned on their headlights on the 2 cars. The cops opened their squad car doors and stood behind them with their guns drawn. I could hear the cops through the bullhorn telling the occupants of the car to exit the vehicle now with their hands on top of their head. An unknown male emerged first wearing only his boxer shorts. Kathy, still topless, came out next wearing her gym shorts. Both occupants were told to turn around and place their hands against the car. 2 cops, under the cover of the other 2 cops, approached Kathy and her friend, grabbed their hands one at a time, and handcuffed their hands behind their back. I saw one cop bend down and pick up a plastic bag. He then showed it to the other cop and motioned for the other 2 backup cops to come over. 2 of the cops went over to the Bronco and opened both front doors. One cop came back holding 2 additional plastic bags. The cops conversed for a couple of minutes, ran a check on the license plates of the 2 cars, and checked the driver licenses they had found in Kathy's car and the Bronco. Although I didn't have much light, I was snapping pictures as fast as I could. I then saw the cops take Kathy and put her in the back seat of one squad car, and her friend went into the back seat of the other squad car. Then the squad cars drove away. I headed back to my car and drove home. When I got home, the kids were still asleep. 6 o'clock came around, so I woke the kids up to get them ready for school. At 7:30 a.m., I drove the kids to school. I thought to myself that I was doing a pretty good job as Mr. Mom. I drove home and called my boss to let him know I would not be coming in that day. About 11 a.m., I got a collect call from a sobbing Kathy telling me she needed to be bailed out of jail. She and her trainer had been arrested at the gym for possession of an illegal substance. I said I would find out what her bail was and see what I could do. She was crying as she hung up. I called my attorney and told him I wanted to file for divorce that week and to request supervised visits for Kathy. I also wanted him to obtain a restraining order against Kathy to stay away from the kids and not come within 100 yards of my home. Finally, I let out a sigh of relief. I walked over to my liquor cabinet, took out my bottle of Johnny Walker Blue Label, and poured about half my glass. I went into the living room and, as I looked at her smiling photo, I quietly said, "You filthy 304, you can rot in jail. You will never come back to my home." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Emily and Michael Thompson's love story began as a fairy tale. They met during their sophomore year of college, a time when both were full of youthful exuberance and unbounded optimism about the future. Michael was studying architecture, always sketching buildings and dreaming of constructing something that would stand the test of time. Emily, on the other hand, was pursuing a degree in psychology, fascinated by the complexities of the human mind and heart. They crossed paths at a campus event, and the connection was instant. Emily was drawn to Michael's quiet confidence and his ability to see beauty in the mundane, while Michael was captivated by Emily's warmth and her insightful nature. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Late-night study sessions turned into deep conversations about life, love, and their dreams. They explored the city together, discovering hidden cafes and quiet parks, making each place their own private world. Michael often surprised Emily with sketches of her or the places they visited, capturing their moments together in pencil and ink. Emily kept a journal, filling it with her thoughts about their relationship, each entry a testament to the deep love she felt for Michael. They were inseparable, and their friends often remarked on how perfectly they complemented each other. After graduation, it seemed only natural for them to get married. They were young, in love, and full of dreams. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, attended by close family and friends. As they exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever, neither could have imagined that one day those vows would be tested in ways they were unprepared for. They moved into a charming little house in the suburbs, a fixer-upper that Michael eagerly took on as his first personal project. Emily, always supportive, filled the house with warmth and love, making it a home. Their future seemed bright, with plans for a family, career advancements, and a life filled with love. But as the years passed, the very foundation of their relationship would be shaken, and the fairy tale would slowly begin to unravel. It was early morning when Emily woke up alone, the sun casting a faint glow through the curtains of their once cozy bedroom. She instinctively reached for the other side of the bed, but it was cold, empty. Michael had left early again. This had become the new norm, her waking up to an empty bed, and the house eerily quiet. A sigh escaped her lips as she reluctantly got up, feeling the chill of the hardwood floor beneath her feet, a stark contrast to the warmth she used to feel in their relationship. As she made her way to the kitchen, she found the now familiar sight, a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting, don't wait up, love, Michael." Emily picked up the note, staring at the words that once would have comforted her. The words were still there, "Love, Michael," but they felt hollow, lacking the sincerity they once held. She crumpled the note in frustration, feeling a pang in her chest. Where did things go wrong? She remembered the days when Michael would wake up with her, make them breakfast, and they would talk about their plans for the day. They used to sit at this very table, laughing, sharing stories, making plans for the future. Now it was just silence, the clinking of dishes, and the sound of the clock ticking, each tick a reminder of the growing distance between them. Emily glanced around the kitchen, noticing the little things that hadn't been touched in weeks. The stack of mail that Michael hadn't sorted through, the books he had stopped reading halfway, the dust gathering on the windowsill. Everything seemed to reflect the state of their relationship, neglected, distant, and cold. She missed the warmth, the connection they once shared. She missed the spontaneous dates, the late-night talks, the way Michael used to look at her like she was the most important person in the world. Now she felt like a stranger in her own marriage, living with a man who was physically present but emotionally absent. Determined to salvage what was left, Emily decided she would try harder. She would find a way to reconnect with Michael, to remind him of the love they once shared. But deep down, she feared that it might already be too late, that the distance between them had grown too vast to bridge. The evening air was thick with tension. As Michael finally walked through the front door, his shoulders slumped from exhaustion. Emily was already in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on dinner. She had prepared his favorite meal: roast chicken with rosemary and garlic, mashed potatoes, and a side of steamed vegetables. She hoped that the familiar comfort of a home-cooked meal might spark something between them, a reminder of the simpler, happier times. Michael walked in, greeted her with a half-hearted kiss on the cheek, and mumbled a quick apology for being late. Busy day at work, H. Like a knife, Michael wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words, because deep down, he wasn't sure if they would be. And so they lay there, side by side, but miles apart, each lost in their own thoughts, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. The decision came weeks later, after countless nights of restless sleep and endless days of strained conversations. The tension between them had reached a breaking point, and both Emily and Michael knew that something had to give. They could no longer go on like this, living in a house filled with silence, pretending that everything was fine when it was anything but. They agreed to meet at the park, the one where they had spent so many happy hours in the past. It was early autumn, and the trees were beginning to shed their leaves, the ground covered in a blanket of orange and gold. The crisp air carried a sense of finality, as if nature itself was mirroring the state of their relationship. Emily arrived first, sitting on the bench where they used to sit together, talking about their hopes and dreams. She looked around, taking in the familiar sights and sounds, but they no longer brought her the comfort they once did. Instead, they felt like remnants of a life that was slipping away from her, a life she could no longer hold on to. Michael arrived a few minutes later, his face etched with fatigue and sadness. He sat down beside her, leaving a small gap between them, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had grown between them. For a moment, they just sat there in silence, watching as the leaves fell gently to the ground, neither knowing how to start the conversation they both dreaded. It was Emily who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, I think we need to face the truth. We're not happy anymore, and pretending isn't helping." Michael nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the ground. "I've been thinking the same. I don't want to hurt you, Emily, but I don't know if we can find our way back to each other. We've tried, but maybe it's time to let go." Emily felt a lump in her throat as she listened to his words. She had known this was coming, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Maybe it's time to let go," she repeated, her voice shaking. "We've tried, but sometimes love isn't enough." Michael reached for her hand, and she let him take it, their fingers intertwining for what felt like the last time. They sat there, holding on to each other, knowing that this was the end of their journey together. It was a moment filled with sorrow, but also a sense of acceptance. They both knew that this decision, as painful as it was the right one. The park, once a place of joy and laughter, now felt like a place of mourning. They shared one final embrace, not out of passion, but out of a deep sadness for what they had lost. As they pulled away, they looked at each other, tears in their eyes, knowing that this was their final goodbye. They stood up, each feeling the weight of the moment, and walked away in opposite directions, the distance between them growing with each step. The autumn leaves crunched beneath their feet, a poignant reminder of the life they had shared and the future that would never be. The finality of their decision weighed heavily on Emily as she walked home alone, her heart heavy with grief. The house, once a sanctuary filled with love and laughter, now felt like a hollow shell. Each step she took felt like a step further away from the life she had known, the life she had cherished. As she entered the empty house, the silence was deafening. The familiar creaks of the floorboards, the ticking of the clock, all felt like echoes of a life that was no longer hers. She looked around, taking in the remnants of their life together. The photos on the walls, the books on the shelves, the little knickknacks they had collected over the years. Each item held a memory, a piece of the life they had built together, now shattered. Emily walked into the kitchen, where she had spent so many mornings preparing breakfast for Michael, where they had shared countless meals and conversations. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had once planned their future together. But now, that future was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of loss. The tears she had been holding back finally came, spilling down her cheeks as she buried her face in her hands. She cried for the love they had lost, for the dreams that would never come true, for the life they would never share. The pain was unbearable, a deep, aching void that consumed her entire being. But as the tears flowed, Emily also felt a sense of release. The decision had been made, and there was no going back. She knew that this was the end of one chapter of her life, and the beginning of another. It was a chapter, Fee. The house, once filled with love and laughter, now stood as a testament to a love that had faded slowly but surely. And as Emily sat there, she knew that she would carry the memories of that love with her, even as she stepped into the unknown future. The love may have faded, but it would never be forgotten. The days that followed were a blur of emotions for Emily. She went through the motions of daily life, but everything felt hollow, as if a part of her was missing. The house, once filled with the sounds of two people in love, now echoed with the emptiness of her solitude. Each room held memories, reminders of what she had lost, and it was hard to escape the weight of those memories. Emily spent most of her time in the kitchen, the heart of their home, where she had always found comfort in cooking and baking. But now, the joy of preparing meals had vanished. She would often find herself standing at the counter, staring blankly at the ingredients, unable to muster the energy to create anything. The passion she once had for cooking, something that had brought her and Michael together, had faded along with their love. She tried to keep herself busy, filling her days with chores and errands. But the loneliness was always there, lurking in the background. Nights were the hardest. The bed felt too big, too empty. Without Michael beside her, she would lie awake for hours, her mind racing with thoughts of what could have been, what she could have done differently. But no matter how much she replayed the past, she knew that the outcome would have been the same. One night, unable to sleep, Emily went into the living room and sat down on the couch. She looked around at the familiar surroundings, the photos of her and Michael on their wedding day, the souvenirs from their trips together, the little mementos of a life they had once shared. The pain in her chest was almost unbearable, a deep aching sorrow that threatened to overwhelm her. She reached for one of the photo albums on the coffee table and opened it. The pages were filled with pictures of happier times, vacations, holidays, anniversaries. Each photo captured a moment of joy, a time when they had been so in love, so sure of their future together. But now, those moments felt like they belonged to someone else, another life that she could no longer reach. As she turned the pages, tears began to fall, one by one, onto the glossy photos. She tried to hold them back, but the floodgates had opened, and there was no stopping the torrent of emotions that came rushing out. She cried for the love that had faded, for the dreams that would never come true, for the future that had been lost. The weight of it all was crushing, and she felt like she might drown in her own grief. But as the tears flowed, Emily also felt a strange sense of relief. She had been holding everything in for so long, trying to be strong, trying to keep it together. But now, in the quiet of the night, alone with her memories, she finally allowed herself to feel the full extent of her pain. It was a cathartic release, a necessary step in her journey of healing. When the tears finally subsided, Emily closed the photo album and set it aside. She wiped her eyes and took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be many more nights like this, filled with tears and heartache. But she also knew that she would get through it, that she would find a way to rebuild her life, one step at a time. The love she had shared with Michael was gone, but it would always be a part of her. It had shaped her, taught her, and made her who she was, and while it was painful to let go, she knew that it was the only way to move forward, to find peace and happiness once again. As she stood up and walked back to her bedroom, Emily felt a small flicker of hope in her heart. It was faint, barely noticeable, but it was there, a reminder that life would go on, that she would find a way to heal. And with that thought, she crawled into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and closed her eyes, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Thank you for being a part of Narrative Stories. Your support and engagement mean the world to us. We are committed to bringing you the best in storytelling. What kinds of stories would you like to see next? Share your thoughts in the comments below. He said, his tone weary. Emily forced a smile, trying to hide her disappointment. She had been looking forward to this dinner, hoping it would be a chance for them to talk, to reconnect. But Michael's mind seemed elsewhere, as it often was these days. They sat down at the table, the clinking of silverware, the only sound filling the room. Emily tried to make small talk, asking about his day, but the conversation felt forced. Michael responded in short, curt sentences, his eyes fixed on his plate. The once easy and natural flow of conversation between them had turned into a strained exchange of words, each more painful than the last. Desperate to break the tension, Emily brought up a memory from their past. Do you remember our trip to the coast? That tiny bed and breakfast, the one with the beautiful view of the ocean. We should go back sometime, just the two of us. Her voice was hopeful, filled with a longing to recapture the magic of their earlier days together. But Michael barely looked up from his plate. Yeah, maybe, he said distractedly. I've got a lot on my plate right now, though. His response was like a dagger to Emily's heart. The lack of enthusiasm, the dismissiveness. It was clear that the trip meant nothing to him anymore. It was just another memory, lost in the sea of responsibilities and stresses that had taken over their lives. Emily swallowed the lump in her throat, forcing herself to keep it together. She felt a growing sense of frustration and helplessness. It was as if she was reaching out to someone who was already gone, trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. The man she once knew, the man she fell in love with, seemed to be a shadow of his former self, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to reach him. Dinner ended in silence, the once comforting space of their home, now filled with an unbearable emptiness. Michael excused himself early, retreating to the living room to watch television, while Emily stayed behind, staring at the remnants of their meal. The connection they once shared, the love that used to fill their home, was now replaced with an overwhelming sense of loneliness. Emily wondered how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was okay, when it was clear that their marriage was falling apart. The nights had become the hardest part for Emily. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, she could hear the steady rhythm of Michael's breathing beside her. He was there, physically, but the emotional distance between them was palpable. The man she used to confide in, the man who once held her close and whispered sweet nothings in her ear, now felt like a stranger. The silence between them was suffocating, a constant reminder of how far they had drifted apart. Emily's mind raced as she lay there, replaying their recent interactions over and over. The coldness, the indifference, the way Michael seemed to have checked out of their marriage. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was clear that they were both miserable. With her heart pounding in her chest, she turned to him, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "Michael," she whispered, hoping not to wake him too suddenly. But he was already awake, staring at the ceiling, just like she had been. He sighed deeply, as if he knew what was coming. "What is it, Emily?" His voice was tired, weary, like a man who had run out of things to say. "What's happening to us?" she asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "I feel like we're losing each other, and I don't know how to stop it." Michael didn't respond right away. He closed his eyes, rubbing his temples as if trying to find the right words. "I'm just stressed, Emily. Work is demanding, and I'm doing my best to keep up. But I know things haven't been the same between us." Emily's eyes welled up with tears. "It's not just work, Michael. We don't talk like we used to. We don't laugh. We don't connect anymore. I miss you. I miss us." Michael finally turned to face her, his expression softening. He reached out to touch her hand, but his touch felt distant, almost perfunctory. "I miss us too, but I don't know how to fix this. Maybe we've just grown apart." The words hit Emily like a ton of bricks. Grown apart. It was what she had feared the most, the realization that despite all their efforts, they might be beyond saving. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she turned away from him, unable to hold back the flood of emotions any longer. Michael watched her, feeling a pang of guilt and sadness. He hated seeing her like this, hated that he couldn't be the husband she needed him to be. But he was exhausted from work, from the pressure of trying to hold everything together, and from the constant feeling that no matter what he did, it was never enough. The room was filled with the sound of Emily's quiet sobs, each one cutting through the silence.